Khorne has a ton of infantry at the same price point, so how much do they overlap with each other's jobs? Well, to solve this once and for all, we're going to be looking at some tests. Our first test is against Forsaken, a middle-of-the-road infantry unit with high armor and high damage versus unarmored. Dual weapons rout them off after 42 seconds, and they have 60% HP left. Khorne halberds do well too, and they rout them off after 47 seconds. That armor piercing definitely coming into play, and they have about 55% HP left. But bloodletters rout them off the fastest yet at 36 seconds, but they're brought down to 45% HP. Lastly, we have Khorne warriors who rout them off after 47 seconds. It's the same amount of time as the halberds, but they go down to 50% HP. So if you want to grind through mid-tier infantry as fast as possible, bloodletters are your best option. Next test is against handguns. Bloodletters bring them down to half ammunition before they disintegrate. And for halberds and dual axes, they actually outperform bloodletters. Lastly, we have Khorne warriors who stomp the competition without even routing. Armor piercing shots do have a bit of normal damage, so Khorne warriors are tankier even when armor piercing is involved. Next is a speed test running at some cannons. Bloodletters make it to the cannons after 116 seconds, while Khorne warriors get there a decent amount slower at 143 seconds. This is a big difference, especially if the enemy is skirmishing or if you need to dodge spells. Now let's see how these units do against light cavalry. They're large but low armor, so all the units should have a shot here. Khorne warriors rout them off after 23 seconds, and bloodletters do surprisingly bad at 44 seconds. It seems like the AI wasn't attacking properly though, so let's test again. In the second test, they rout them off at a speedy 20 seconds, which is faster than the Khorne warriors, but notably, they take a bit more damage than the other units. Dual weapons are a strong contender to bloodletters here, but they also take 23 seconds. Lastly, we have the Khorne halberds, and without even countercharging, they rout the unit in only 18 seconds, a good margin faster than the Khorne warriors. So even though the halberds are an obvious choice against armored cavalry, expect them to still be the best option against light. Now let's see how well these units trade into elite infantry. Halberds trade decent and they bring the Zarguard down to 50%, and dual weapons do quite well considering the circumstances, bringing the Zarguard down to 25%, whereas bloodletters do surprisingly bad, only doing 40% damage. That low armor means they die very quickly. Lastly, we have Khorne warriors who do as well as the bloodletters, the lack of armor piercing really hurting them here. Now in Warhammer, we also have to deal with single entities, and for this test we'll use Nakari with no items or spells. Khorne warriors, after a long fight, bring them down to 50%. A pretty good trade, while bloodletters only get him down to 65%. But if Nakari didn't have magic damage, it seems like they would have brought him down to 50%. And the halberds grind out for a long time. Their bonus versus large, helping to punch through Nakari's high melee defense, and they actually win it. Very impressive considering the cost difference. Finally, we have the dual axes, and they perform a lot better than the bloodletters. Nakari has low armor, and their high weapon strength bring them down all the way to 20%. So overall, if I only had to take one unit, it would be the dual weapons. They work well as a sturdy unit who can grind down infantry, but they won't perform poorly in any situation, even against armored. What surprised me though is that bloodletters underperformed in almost every situation. Of course, they're much faster than other infantry, which makes them better at chasing units, and it's a much more useful stat than you might think. The video in the bottom right shows why. Now if you found this useful, I'm posting behind the scenes content to my enticles. And yes, that's the name now of my YouTube members.